Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Welcome our Montanaro home church. Let us prepare our heart to heaven. Let's sing a song. 180. This is my Father's world. 180. This is my Father's world.
This is my Father's world, and to my listening ears, all nature sings and round me rings the music of the spheres. This is my Father's world, I rest me in the of rocks and trees, of skies and seas, His hand the wonders wrought. This is my Father's world. The birds their carols raise, the morning light, the lily white, declare their Maker's praise. This is my Father's world. He shines in all that's fair. In the rustling grass I hear Him pass. He speaks to me everywhere. This is my Father's world. Oh, let me never forget that though the wrong seems not so strong, God is the ruler yet. This is my Father's world. The battle is not done. Jesus who died shall be satisfied, and earth and heaven be one.
Thank you. Let us stand up and greet the Heavenly Father, God, and true parents. Today is a Sunday morning, last day of June 30, 2019. Let us bow. Hello. Join me in prayer. 살아계시는 하나님 아버지, 참 부모님, 안녕하십니까? We are so grateful to come in front of you with humble heart and repentful heart. We are grateful to receive your word and your teaching. Heavenly Father, in this world, we can hear the news was all destruction and suffering. We never heard the happy news. We are fighting the good and the evil. We can see the news of the world, the war and also hunger and disease, and also in the America is a heart disease and all kind of disease. People is depressed and suicidal and all kind of misfortune. We long way to find you and long way to find Christ. I was walking toward the school. I was 10 years old, the elementary school. After school, some person was describing the Jesus image. I didn't know what to talking about, but I clearly burned in my mind. He was standing there in the white clothes and the long hair, but striking my heart. That is the first time I met Jesus. Since then, I was searching long time to this world because I heard so many heartbreaking news. Must be something new and something true in this earth, because you can see the star is beautiful and the mountain is really tall and big, and the ocean is so blue and deep. Without the human being, the old nature is so beautiful. And I was wondering why the human being is so struggling and so misfortune, the event is happening. And then I searched and searched, I met you, and 15 years old, I was really climbing up the old difficulty and wonder, and then 20 years, I found you. I found you and I found Christ. Since then, my life changed. Heavenly Father, many young people right now is wondering where is I can fit, or who I want to be. This is time to encourage young people to seek truth. Now you send it the returning Christ, Reverend Samuel Moon, taught so many things about love, about lineage, about your culture. Now the second king brought up the next level. We have a responsibility to listen, understanding, digest your word, and we have to choose the good or bad or evil. We have to choose our own sake. Please guide today. Today is the last day. Through your truth, explore to the world. Who will listen? Who will attend? Who will make it? You are waiting for us to reach the sky, to meet the Messiah. And then meet Messiah, we attend and make substantial kingdom of heaven on this earth. This is a big challenge, but I hope everybody can be serious, listen your word, and marinate in the thought and mind, and to make determination. I wish the people choose good and loving and helping others to make better. Please guide today. Your word can reflect our thought and mind and become the part of your providence. Heavenly Father, please guide our pastor, can receive your word and share the heart and mind from you. Please bless our pastor. Thank you very much. I report in the name of Raman and Tamik Montanaro, blessed Central family. Aju, Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. Please seated and welcome our Pastor Montanaro. Welcome.
So I brought a lot of books up today. Hi everyone.
Hi.
I brought a lot of books up today because I have a lot of things that are going through my mind right now. I think the hardest thing for us to feel is the hope that pushes us forward. We need hope in life. You can see it on baseball teams. My son is playing in the second game of a tournament, the state tournament for baseball, and you know, you can see on baseball teams, you can see on soccer teams, when they lose hope, the whole spirit of the team just sags. You can feel it. You can feel the team sag. And after that, they just can't fight, and they lose very quickly. Spirit is very important. Human beings, we're very much creatures of spirit, not creatures of instinct. I've tried to make this point again and again and again over the years that I've been doing these sermons, that we are not just animals. We are more than animals. We're guided by spirit as well as by instinct. Both of these forces act within us. Our instinctive nature drives us to procreate, to have sex, to eat, to sleep, to be comfortable, to find a comfortable place to live physically. But our spiritual nature, our spiritual desires guide us to make relationships, to make connection, to make a connection finally to God. And without satisfying our spiritual nature, we can't be happy. Any more than we can be happy by not satisfying our physical nature. If we're hungry, if we're cold, if we're alone physically, not having a sexual relationship, not able to make, connections to people physically, we feel lonely and empty. And also we can die physically if we don't eat or sleep or things like that. So we need both. It's not one or the other, which is true, spirit or instinct. Both of them are there. But we cannot deny spiritual nature. And the thing that a spirit is always trying to do is go to a higher level of relationship. We're always seeking a higher level. We want, if we're living in our family's not enough. We want to get married to get out of our family. We want to get married so we can connect to another family. Right? Marriage is the way, ultimately, that two families can become one. So through marriage, two families become one, and two clans can become one, two tribes can become one. The famous story of Romeo and Juliet, right? The Capulets and the Montagues? Montagues and the Capulets. They hated each other, but through the love of one boy and one girl, this is obviously Shakespeare, but anyway, there was a final confrontation between these two clans. But we seek higher levels of relationship. If you are the mayor of a town, you may seek to become governor. If you're the governor of a state, you may seek to become president. What are you going to do after you're president? Like Jimmy Carter, he spent the rest of his life as an ambassador of peace. He's tried to go around the world. He wasn't satisfied with just leading America. After he finished his presidency, he wanted to continue, and he's been recognized, I think even given a Nobel Prize for his work in trying to bring people together, in Israel and Palestine and North and South Korea. He's tried to be a diplomat. You're never going to be satisfied, in other words, at any level. Our spirit wants a bigger and bigger stage to act on. Ultimately, what's the highest level he can reach? Is it the world level? Is getting a Nobel Prize the highest thing you can attain in your life? What's higher than that?
One with God.
Yeah. Father used to make a joke. I mean, he wasn't joking. He would say, some people say, well, my father's the president of the United States. Are you proud of that? Or my father's the richest man in the world. Or my father is this, or my mother did this, or my parents do this. But what if you could say, my father is God? That's the highest thing you can have, right? If your father is the creator of the universe. And ultimately, that's the relationship that we all seek. We're seeking a relationship with God. So, the nature that seeks that is hope. We want to feel hope. In other words, if we're hopeless, it means that we don't believe there's any chance that I can improve, that I can get out of a difficult situation, that I can go to a higher level. I feel stuck. Then I feel hopeless. If you're a baseball team and it's a ninth inning and you're down by 20 runs, maybe you have some reason to be hopeless. But even in that case, I've seen teams, maybe 20 runs I've never seen, but the classic is the Boston Red Sox breaking the curse, I think in 2004. They were down in the American League Championship Series, they were fighting the Yankees for a chance to go to the World Series. And the Yankees won out of a best of 7 series. They won the first 3 games. And no team has ever come back from a 3-0 deficit in any kind of series, a 7-game series in the American League pennant. Plus, in the last game that they were beaten by the Yankees, they lost 19-8, I think it was. They got their butts kicked. 19-8 is unbelievable as a score. It's more of a football game score than a baseball game score. The Yankees beat them soundly. And then they came back from that and they won 4 straight. And they went to the World Series. And they won the World Series. So that's one of the greatest comebacks. And we've seen comebacks in sports. And one of the great things is highlights, if you go to YouTube, is comebacks in sports. Watching somebody that's way behind in a race that surges forward, or somebody that's down by many points that comes back. There's always hope. There's always hope.
What year was that?
2004. But I have a lot of things going through my mind, and I wanted to read to you a few things. First of all, the song we just sang, page 180, "This Is My Father's World." The last verse is just very beautiful and very interesting. "This is my Father's world. Oh, let me never forget that though the wrong seems often so strong, God is the ruler yet. This is my Father's world. The battle is not done. Jesus who died shall be satisfied, and earth and heaven be one." That's really beautiful, actually. And in a way, that's the theme of my sermon today. That this is my Father's world. Oh, let me never forget that though the wrong seems often so strong, God is the ruler yet. This is my Father's world. The battle is not done. Jesus who died shall be satisfied, and earth and heaven be one. So I wanted to share that verse again, because sometimes when we're singing, we don't hear the words we're singing. We just sing them and it's done. But thinking about it, does this feel like God's world? Does it feel like God has any power to change this world? Certainly, when we look at the world, we see a lot of evil. And the question has always come up, is God doing anything about the evil in the world? And we look for God, we're waiting for God to make a miracle happen. Christianity especially is guilty of this. Christianity is waiting for God and Jesus to come again, the second coming of Christ, and vindicate the saints. In a sense, they're waiting for vengeance. They want revenge, actually, on all the evil people that have done damage to them over thousands of years. They want revenge. They want vindication. But is that how God works? Well, if it is, then God's not working. See, that's the problem. If you have that view that is shared by many Christians, that God and Jesus have to save this world, we can't do it. That God has to step in, that God has to do a miracle and destroy evil and vindicate us, then when you see evil continuously surviving, you lose your faith in God. And many Christians have lost their faith in God. This brings up the second book I want to share with you. This book I read back in 1995. I was the teaching assistant to actually a Marxist teacher in my seminary. She was invited to teach. She actually invited herself to teach. And later on we discovered that she was probably a spy for the Communist Party in our movement, and that she was trying to work within our movement like a mole, kind of, to destroy the Unification Church, because the Unification Church was one of the most powerful anti-communist forces in the world. Father was able to penetrate communist teaching and expose the fallacies, the falsehoods in communist teaching. And because of that, this small movement, the unification movement, was successful in actually pushing back the tide of communism that was rising in the 1950s and 60s and 70s. And finally, by the 1980s, we were successful. We could push it back. And our movement, the communists knew who Father was. From the KGB and the Kremlin and the Soviet Union to and the Comintern and all the other different groups, they knew who Father was. They had identified him as one of the most dangerous anti-communists in the world. Actually, the New Jersey police did a routine traffic stop in, I think, 1986 or 87, and they discovered that they found the man was a North Korean spy sent by the Japanese Red Army, the Japanese Communist Party, to kill Father, to kill Reverend Moon. And he had maps of Father's house and how to get in. He had many weapons in the trunk, and they arrested him. So this kind of thing happened. His life was in danger for many years because he was the #1 enemy for the Communist Party around the world. And I knew this, but I come from a liberal background. My ancestry, my family is quite liberal. You know, we come from a theater background, and the theater is generally very liberal, very, politically liberal, socially liberal, and most of the time actors who are very emotional, but not necessarily so trained intellectually, meaning logically or philosophically. I think Russell Brand, what is it? No, not Russell Crowe. Russell Brand, I think is the comic. Anyway, he's one of the few exceptions. He's very philosophical. Jim Carrey is also trying to be more philosophical. But most actors tend to be very emotional and very passionate and very liberal. They appreciate relaxing social mores because generally actors want to play roles that push them to limits, and many times, like in the classic play Equus, where they always invite young men who are quite popular to play the role of the leading role. It's kind of a horse who comes to life or something like that, and it's always nude. They got Daniel Radcliffe to play it when he finished the Harry Potter series. It's just, this kind of thing. When you see Broadway, off-Broadway, when you see plays, theater has always pushed limits, and so actors appreciate the freedom to do that, and so they don't like conservative movements, and generally they ally themselves more with the liberal, socialist, and even communist movements. Historically, it's true. So the Communist Party has a field day in Hollywood. In other words, the actors generally tend to be very sympathetic with communist causes. So growing up as a liberal, growing up as a member of an acting family, I wasn't particularly concerned about communism as, the enemy of the people or something like that. So I joined our church, and I discovered that communism was really evil, that it was the enemy of God, that it taught an atheistic materialism, and that it was violent, and it preached violent revolution. And I understood all these things, and I heard Father when he said, you should understand that the Communist Party has infiltrated our movement, and that there are many of your brothers and sisters in our movement that are communists, that are actually spies, that are working for the Communist Party. And also for the FBI and the CIA. They have also infiltrated our movement. You should know this. And Father would even smile and wave at them like, hello, hi there, you're welcome, He wasn't afraid to have them in our movement. He just wanted to let us know that they were there. And in May or April of 1995, Father said that the conditions had been set so strongly by Father that he could now proclaim that the day that the unification movement could be infiltrated so easily by people who wanted to destroy it was over, and that these people would now have to leave. And at the same time, I was the teaching assistant to this woman, Claire Horton, who was an anthropology professor who had volunteered to join our movement, volunteered to be on the board of trustees at the Unification Theological Seminary, and volunteered to teach for free at the seminary, our red flags should have gone up. And she was actually an anthropology professor, which, if you know anthropology, it is the most Marxist of all of the sociology and psychology and social sciences. Anthropology is the most Marxistly influenced, because anthropology bases itself on the idea of mostly Darwinism and the idea of survival of the fittest and cultural relativism. So there's no, in most anthropologists don't believe there's any right or wrong in culture. They just believe that, you know, whatever a culture believes, you should study it and you should be neutral. So that seems very scientific, but actually it lends itself very much to a Marxist way of thinking. So we didn't have any, clue about this. And I just happened to pick up this book in May of this year that I was finishing my term. Actually, in probably April I read it. Our term ended in late May at the seminary. And I was her teaching assistant, and she had made some very strange moves. She was always sitting at tables asking questions and probing about our movement. She's treated us with great respect. We all honored her. We all fought to get in her one class she taught every year. But that year she had done something very strange. She had refused to just allow anyone to join her class. She was going to filter students. This has never been done at the seminary. Anyone who signed up for any course, as long as there was room in the course, they could take the course. And this was the first year that any teacher had done this. She screened her students. She interviewed them. And she rejected the best student in our class, Michael Kiley, who was a tall man, very gentle, sweet man, who was legally blind. He's looked Coke bottle glasses. You know, Coke bottle, the bottom of a Coke bottle is very thick, and you know, his eyes were very small inside of his lenses. He had to peer at things like this. And he was always on his computer, peering at his computer. Very sweet, gentle man, very smart, and very anti-communist. And he was interviewed, and we were shocked when she rejected his, and he was a senior, this was the last chance he could take her course, and it was shocking. We were all shocked. But there was almost a rebellion, but we all sort of said, let's just, go with whatever's going on. And I joined the class. She didn't reject me, and I became her teaching assistant. Because I'm very liberal, actually. So she kind of probably felt that I was like one with her, And I even cried when she told her story about how in 1970s, when everyone was negative to our movement, she heard about this church that was getting crosses burned on their lawn. We had crosses burned on our lawn in the South by the Ku Klux Klan and things like this, because we were racism. Right? We married internationally, interracially. We weren't racist. So racists in the South took us as a threat. So we had crosses burned on our lawn, and she came over, knocked on the door, she said, to find out who else was getting crosses burned on their lawn, because she had had crosses burned on her lawn. So she was like portraying herself as an anti-racist, sort of a progressive thinker who had actually volunteered to come and join our movement. And we all sort of were moved by this story. Well, anyway, I read this book. In the middle of her course, I think God guided me to read this book. It's an old book. It comes from 1950, I believe it was published. 52, maybe?
What's it called?
It's called I Led 3 Lives. And this is the book's title page right here. I Led 3 Lives. It's by Herbert Philbrick. So sometime if you can zoom in on this so that people can see it. If they want to pick it up, you can go online and get it. It may have be in some libraries. It actually was a very big bestseller actually when it first came out. I Led 3 Lives. And Herbert Philbrick, you probably heard of the House Un-American Activities Committee led by Joseph McCarthy. Well, he criticizes it actually because he feels that it wasn't the right way to fight communism. But in 1940, as a pacifist, he was a pacifist. He was a Christian, a Baptist, and a pacifist, meaning he believed that we should stay out of war. he began to find himself getting in these different groups, and he felt that somehow the control of the group was being taken over by other than himself. He had tried to found a group against the war, you know, like tried to keep America out of the war in Europe. This was about 1939 when Hitler had invaded Poland and Czechoslovakia, and America was teetering on the edge of World War II, and many Americans, 90% actually, did not want to get involved in World War II. They did not want to get involved in another European war. They said, let's stay out of it. So his position was not un-American, it was a position of pacifism. And he found that most of the groups that he was in this group, and these people came to help him, but they quickly became, they kind of muscled him out of the leadership, and he was like a puppet, he felt, after a while. And then a red flag went off when some of the literature that they were presenting in his group turned out to be Marxist, and he was concerned and really angry. And then he understood that he had been infiltrated by Marxists. And he thought that was, you know, he didn't know much about it, so he decided to go to the FBI. And the Federal Bureau of Investigation had been watching Marxist groups for many years, and they had been trying to understand more about them. So they said, look, it's up to you what you do. And this is their position for 9 years while he did what he did. It's up to you to do what you do, but we would be interested if you choose to stay in these groups and just see where it leads you and report to us. We can't, there's no crime being committed, so we can't move until a crime is committed. But we are gathering intelligence and information, so we would be interested in any intelligence or information you can give us. And so for 9 years, he says, I led 3 lives: citizen, communist, and counter-spy. So one life was an informant for the FBI, secretly. And he had to be very careful because they were watching him. One life was a secret life as a communist, because gradually they brought him higher and higher into inner circles of secrecy within the Communist Party in the United States. And it isn't all like, oh, banners and, you know, publicly, you know, fight for the people, and, you know, we tend to think that we Americans are very open-minded. We tend to think everybody's as open-minded and honest and sincere as we are. And the communists are open-minded and honest and sincere. They just believe in the Communist, you know, Party, and, you know, no. What he discovered was that there were people working deeply to infiltrate the highest levels. And finally, in his last 2 years as a communist, he was allowed to go and join a pro-4 group, professionals who were no longer, they had to burn their communist cards. They had to cut off their association with the Communist Party. But they were moles. They were the top business, religious, and social leaders in the society. Vice presidents of corporations, you know, Boy Scouts, YMCA. The communists had infiltrated into the highest levels of all of these different groups. So, and their favorite groups were conservative groups, because they would use these groups as a front for their own identity. In other words, no one could believe that the vice president of the Boy Scouts was a communist, because the Boy Scouts professed American values and independence, you know, freedom, all this stuff. And so while they were in that role, they didn't do anything to sabotage that group. They just used that as a front for themselves, and then they had positions on other boards, and they could lend their name and give credibility to social movements and student movements that were communist. But of course they weren't communists. They were the deepest dyed red, you could say, communists. So I read this book, and he is shocked at the communist infiltration. He's shocked when he goes to the first Pro-4 meeting. He sees across in this little nice, beautiful house in one of the wealthiest sections of Boston, some of the most influential and important people that he was sure were communists. And he was frozen, and he started to sweat because he was afraid he would be discovered as an FBI informant. But he controlled himself, and he sat down, and he laughed it off, and he just sort of And then he began to see how high it went. And then, when the FBI decided to arrest and to try 12 men, finally 11, because one of them was very ill. Foster was very ill and he was taken off the docket. But 11 men were chosen to be, the FBI chose to make a case. And in the, I think it was the first or second district court of New York City, there was a famous trial of these 11 men. And he was called. And this is him testifying at that trial. And he was the star witness.
How do you spell his last name?
Philbrick. 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 Herbert Philbrick. He was a star witness for the prosecution. And he had literally truckloads of every document, he was like, he basically kept careful notes of everything he did for 9 years and turned it all into the FBI and all the literature and everything. So there were literally truckloads of evidence that he had. And he showed that the communists had acted in secret, that they had been secretly, on the surface, talking about socialism and social change through the electoral process, but that behind the scenes they were working to sabotage key industries and key organizations that they had infiltrated, that they had subversion. They would go in, they would support an organization as long as it served their purpose, and then they would sabotage it and pull the plug, and the whole organization would collapse. And they did this again and again and again and again. And they would change their position. They're very Machiavellian, meaning to the communists, politics is just a game. There's no morality. There's no, right or wrong. There's only what is necessary to get what you want done. And up into and including violence and murder. So they were secretly at the highest levels preaching the Marxist belief that social change is not possible without violence. Let me repeat that. This is very important because many of my friends don't know about communism. Communism's basic tenet, Marxist, Leninist, Stalinist teachings, are that social change, you cannot change the evil of this world without violence. Because the people who have power will not let it go freely. And they're the reason there's problems. So without killing them and destroying the wrong social order, you cannot allow the proletariat, the people, to rise up and create the dictatorship of the proletariat. A new form of dictatorship, a new form of oppression, Marxists said, only necessary while we weed out the final vestiges of capitalism that are still hanging around in society through murder, through purges. When that's done, the dictatorship of the proletariat will wither away naturally. And the ideal communist state will come, where we are all brothers and sisters. But that violent step and the violent proletariat dictatorship is necessary to purge the unclean elements of capitalism, selfishness, out of our souls. So they believe that the only way to change human beings is by fear and murder. You kill the people who are in power, and you terrify the other people to act right. But then somehow everyone's going to be happy at the end of that and be able to love each other as brothers and sisters. So this is what communism teaches. I didn't know the depth of the infiltration. So when I read this book, I'm reading the book, and red flags are going off. And I'm like, suddenly at the end of the book, it was not even at the end. I was halfway through. I realized that Claire Horton was a communist. That she had been planted by the Communist Party in the unification movement because of our important position in fighting communism. Of course they're going to put somebody there. And it was like a crystallization, like a realization that just went like this. Suddenly everything she was doing became very clear. And I spoke to Dr. Frank Kaufman and others in our movement about it, and they even mentioned that her credentials as a professor had been questionable. There was some kind of discrepancy about her credentials as a professor, and she was asked to leave a previous university. But she had pawned it off as being kind of because of her political positions and that kind of thing. Anyway, to make a long story short, she never came back. When I began spreading the word to different professors and people about what I was thinking, she never came back. And I'm sure that she was a communist. She had been finding out information about every graduating class, and when Father would send them to, say, Africa as missionaries or different places, there were probably welcoming parties of communist activists in those countries to destroy that person's credibility, to destroy their lives, to play games with them, make them look like criminals, and make them get kicked out of the country. So she had done great damage to our movement. This book I recommend. If you don't understand communism, it's called I Led 3 Lives. It's about 60 years old, or 70 years old now. And I recommend you read it. But let's go back to our point. Hope, right? So, what is our hope? Communists believe that you can't change society because people are inherently selfish. So the only way to change a selfish person is to kill it. But somehow they believe that the poor working people are not selfish. The poor working people are good people. They're the proletariat. And if we just give them the power, they'll make everything all right. Well, 70 years of communist history proved them wrong. In the Soviet Union, they destroyed the lives of 60, 70 million people. Mao Zedong, in his Cultural Revolution, same thing. Pol Pot killed 2 million of his countrymen. Anyone wearing glasses was killed because they were intellectual. And they were sold out dupes of the capitalist system because they had received an education. And on and on and on, the list goes on and on. Africa, Rwanda, all these countries, Rhodesia became Zimbabwe, all these countries that had suffered, Angola, communist revolutions, communist takeovers, with incredible bloodshed and no sign of an ideal world appearing. Thugs taking over power. Communist thugs taking over power. So, while that international movement has its back broken now, because even communist China has had to recognize that communist economic theory is false. It doesn't work. Controlling the means of production, price controls, price fixing, all these things that communist theory taught were necessary don't work. The capitalist free market system works. Free market works in terms of establishing, a better price and supply and demand. Of course, monopoly is a danger of capitalism. And we recognize that there are evils in capitalism. Monopoly, conglomerates that control setting prices, that basically take away the true free market. In other words, there's a question, even in capitalism, are we a free market? Do we really have a free market? Or do certain people control the market and this kind of thing? So we do have to look at ourselves honestly. But the solution is not murdering these people. That's not the solution, which is what communism proposes. So what is the solution? Is there any hope? We see evil in communism, but we also see evil in capitalism. And we see a failure to address that evil in Christianity. America is ostensibly a Christian nation. Europe is Christian by history. And yet we find the greatest power centralized in the hands of a few people in Europe, in the United States. And they control the economy, they control politics, and we don't feel that they are doing a good job. There's not true love on the horizon. And then I look at my own life, and I see still struggles that I have with good and evil inside myself. So what is our hope? Is there any hope? So thinking about all these things, going back to the song we just sang, that God is, the ruler of this world. This is my Father's world. So, is that true? Is it true? Is this God's world? Is God doing anything about evil? If so, what? Obviously, in a Sunday service with only a few minutes, I don't have time to give you the full picture of the divine principle Reverend Moon's teaching. The Bible, this is a Korean-English double translation of the Bible. The Bible was the cornerstone of Christian faith, especially Protestant Christian faith, for the last 500 years. And for the last 1,500, 1,700 years, the Bible was the book that all Christians turned to as the foundation of their faith. Jesus appears in the Bible as the Messiah. He's killed on the cross, he's resurrected, and then he opens a new chapter in religious history by founding Christianity. And Christianity grows and becomes the leading power in the world. Christianity at the end of World War II was the #1 religion in the world, the most powerful religion in the world. But Christianity is obviously failing. So many Christians say it's not Christianity's responsibility to change the world. God has to change the world when God comes back through the second coming of Christ. We have welcomed the second coming of Christ. This is the second coming of Christ. Reverend Sun Myung Moon. I'm not pulling any punches and I'm not hiding anything. There's no secrecy here. Full disclosure. Reverend Sun Myung Moon, born in 1920 in a small village in northern Korea, was the second coming of Christ. Father, as we know him, took his mission from Jesus at the age of 15, and for 10 years studied the Bible so deeply that many of his pages were wet with tears, so you couldn't read the letters. He cried so much on the Bible, reading the Bible, trying to find the pattern and the way that God was working in history. He revealed, in 1945, he began his public ministry as the Messiah, and he revealed in the divine principle how God is working in history. Yes, God is working. This is God's world. But because of God's love and his love for us as his children, Father understood that God cannot interfere directly in human affairs. If God comes in, how can God stop you from doing evil? He would have to take over your mind and force you to do good. But that would take away your freedom to choose. So God would have to become a dictator. Sort of like the communists, getting what he wanted by force. But ultimately, even though he might win the battle and stop a particular evil act, by forcing you to do good and taking away your freedom, he takes away the chance you ever have of becoming good. He could stop evil actions, but he can't make good people. Only we can make ourselves good. And that's the front line of the battle. It's not, as a socialist and communist say, by destroying the capitalists and the means of production being given to the proletariat and some nonsense like this, or like a socialist party is saying bigger, bigger, bigger government, take away people's freedom so that they can, be forced to do good by creating a welfare state and by forcing people to be good by taxation and by taking the money away from the wealthy, taking the money away from everyone, and then the government. How's the government going to do a better job than any one individual? Oh, the government's so trustworthy? You really think the government can take care of your money better than you can? You think the government is more trustworthy with public funds than you are with your own money? Big government is the result of socialism coming in and infiltrating our government to the highest levels. Bernie Sanders is a Marxist. The Clintons are Marxists. They're influenced by Marxism. Bill Clinton spent a summer internship or something in Soviet Russia. As Forrest Gump says, stupid is as stupid does. The Clintons, Obama, all of them are Marxists. They're influenced by Marxist teachings and thought that by making a government powerful and big enough, you can control people's bad behavior and make a good society. It doesn't work. It's not true. You can't do it that way. God's way of doing it is different. And that's why we wonder, where's God? Look inside of yourself. God is within you, always speaking to you. Right at the moment you're about to do an evil act, God is still there, waiting for you to turn and ask God, is this a good thing or no? Should I do this or no? God works through our conscience, the human original mind. If we choose to be good and become good, God wins. If we give in to temptation and become evil, God loses. God's fighting that kind of battle for our free will. You decide who wins and who loses. So when we look for hope, the danger is we're looking outside of ourselves for hope. Is Christ coming again? I told you, Christ came back. Reverend Sun Myung Moon is the second coming of Christ. But that doesn't mean that He is going to fix all the problems with a magic wave of His wand. It simply means He's going to teach you even more deeply about human responsibility and about what is the source of evil and how to overcome it. And that's the greatness of the Messiah. It doesn't take away human responsibility, it doubles it. God is doubling down on human responsibility. So all I can say is this: you have to study, you have to pray, you have to come to terms with the fact that God is not going to fix the problems without you. Because I'm part of the problem. If I'm not part of the solution, I'm part of the problem. And so, I have to become a good person. A truly good person. I have to fight a battle inside myself between good and evil. And I have to win. And God is there to help me. And the Messiah is there to help me. But I have to win the battle. You have to win the battle. And when we all win the battle, then we will establish a world free of evil. Not because somebody forced us to, but because we no longer want to be evil. We no longer want to do evil. We no longer want to be selfish. We no longer want to hurt other people to benefit myself. This is the kind of world God wants. A world where goodness is done voluntarily. Where people are voluntarily good. Naturally good. From within their own nature. Doesn't that make sense?
Yes.
God can't work any other way. He cannot wave a magic wand. It's funny, Christians hate magic, Harry Potter and everything, but they still want God to wave a magic wand. They want the solution to come by magic. But it doesn't. It comes by our own freedom and responsibility to become good people. So there are many things that God has given us, though, to help us. And the divine principle, Reverend Moon's teaching, here it is, exposition of the divine principle. I'll put a link for this on the website. It's on my website, I'll put it on the YouTube blurb. Please study. But if you don't understand it, because it is very vast and huge and amazing, and if you need some help to figure what does that mean, call me. Email me. I'm here. That's all I want to do. I'd love to help you out with this and make your family understand, help your family to understand what the real game that's going on is the fight for good and evil inside my own soul, inside your soul, inside your family's soul. The more truth we have, the more love we have, the easier it is for us to follow goodness, though. And so Reverend Moon came and he's shown an example of true love and truth, which will live forever. And I hope that you can take advantage of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's pray. Thank you so much, by the way, everyone, for joining us today. Please join me in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we want to thank you so much. We find today that the hope lies within us, Father. The hope lies within us. Because the struggle is within us between good and evil. Not like the communists said, that the evil is in the hands of the people who have power. But the evil is within each person. And it's just that when people become powerful, their evil is more evident, more transparent, more visible. But Father, it cannot be solved by killing those people and replacing them with other people. Especially not by killing people and replacing them with the people who killed them. Because now we've replaced just selfish people with murderers. And this is what communism has done throughout its history. It's the most evil system of thought ever to come on the planet Earth. I know we fought and gained many victories over communism, but still we see in the politics of this country, in the thought of this country, that some of the same struggles that have been going on for 50, 60, 70 years as communists try to destabilize the power base in this country, try to create division, try to create, using charges of racism and misogyny and bigotry and all the different kinds of isms that they try to throw at people's faces to make people feel hatred and resentment and violence, because their goal is to make people angry, to make people feel resentful, to make people blame other people for their problems so that they can become more violent and that the violent revolution is one step closer. But Father, our true parents taught that that is not the solution, that the solution lies within me and within you and within each of us, Father, that we have to fight the battle of good and evil in myself and become a loving, good person. And then I can help others to become loving, good people. And that when all of us are loving and good, the world will naturally become loving and good. I pray we can win this battle externally in terms of ideas, but internally in terms of our faith and our love. Help us, Father. We want to join with you, Father. We join our hearts to your heart today, and we want to be part of your world, your love, your life, your lineage. Father, please bless this day. Please bless everyone who's listening at home. We ask your blessing, and we offer everything and make this report in the name of Raman and Tamiko Montanaro, a blessed central family. 축복 중심 가정 라만과 타미코 몬타나리 이름으로 보고 드립니다. 아주 아멘. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.